In the last few minutes, we've just been picking up word which we've been following online from Michael Mann, who's the spokesman for Catherine Ashton, the chief negotiator of the world powers. 4 minutes ago, he sent a tweet. EU High, and I'm going to raise it there, EU High Representative Ashton, we have reached agreement between E3+3, that's the world powers, and Iran. That just came in a few minutes ago. We're clearly trying to find out exactly what might be in that agreement. We don't know if it's been signed. We don't know that this is a draft. All we have is that to go on at the moment, and that is the very latest that we have.
What would you expect, James, considering what had been the previous sticking points in the past couple of days? What were they particularly concerned about and divided upon?
It could be any number of issues. It could be the right to enrich uranium. We'll have to see if this agreement is confirmed. If it mentions that, Iran has always wanted that mentioned in a text. The world powers might have found a way to step round it. It might be that Iran has wanted a greater vision of what the final shape of a comprehensive deal might look like. So if there has been a confirmed agreement, we might have to look and see what that looks like as well, whether the world powers have just stuck to an interim 6-month period, as they had been saying, or whether, with Iran's pressure, they will have laid out a roadmap to an entire comprehensive agreement.
And would it have been extremely important that US Secretary of State John Kerry had been there to talk about those final details? Could this have been done without him, or was his appearance then the indication that it was going to happen?
Again, very difficult to tell at this particular stage. I think, given the fact that the foreign ministers are all here, of the major powers, of the permanent members of the UN Security Council, I think that is important because in the end the decision makers have been in the room. So as opposed to junior officials or mid-level officials calling up their capitals, essentially their capitals were here in Geneva. So that short-circuited the process a little bit. It meant that more decisions have been able to be made by those inside the room, not by those on the phone, as we still wait to find out if there are any more updates from those official spokesmen.
James, what about selling this deal now to, the US Congress, the British Parliament, all of the 6 world powers, but also then selling it to Iran? Tell us about how you think Congress will accept this deal and how it will handle the possible increased sanctions that Congress is considering.
Sure. Just to be absolutely cautious about it, I can't really answer that question properly until we see what's in the actual deal that we're only just hearing about, because it's only at that point that we'll be able to work out if there are roadblocks that Congress considers something that it doesn't want. Just to put this in context, in the last few months the US Congress has been making moves towards imposing new sanctions of its own against Iran. Those are sanctions that President Obama has asked Congress to hold off on, and in particular the Senate decided to wait to see what the result was of these particular talks. They might have to go through and read a draft agreement if there has been a confirmed draft agreement. And very clearly, Mr. Obama, Mr. Kerry and his officials, if they have reached a confirmed agreement, will want to show that that is an agreement worth sticking to and that no more sanctions should be added, because we understand in recent days what the world powers wanted to do was to offer some limited form of sanctions relief. So it's hard, of course, to square that with the idea of further sanctions.
Associated Press, James, is just reporting that Laurent Fabius, the French foreign minister, has said that a deal with Iran has been reached. Can you tell us again what France's issues were? Because in the previous round of negotiations, people were saying that France was making it more difficult for everything to be done and dusted.
What we understand from the last round of talks, and forgive me because I keep looking around here, because if there is to be a press conference, it will be held in this building and we might see the foreign ministers walking past us. France, a couple of weeks ago, suggested that it wanted greater restrictions at a heavy water reactor that Iran is building in Arak, that's south of Tehran. That heavy water reactor is not online yet, but if it were to go online at some point, it would be able to produce plutonium with a further reactor, and that is a potential path towards a nuclear weapon. So essentially what France wanted was greater restrictions on that plant. A lot of the other world powers thought that the potential restrictions they were calling for were suitable. It may be that the world powers teamed up in their offer. We will have to see on the draft of an agreement.
Yes, and whatever comes up in that draft, whatever emerges in the next however long it takes for these people to come to the podiums and give us the details, we're pretty sure, aren't we, that it's only going to be the start of even more negotiations?
That's what the world powers have wanted. Essentially, the template they've tried to lay out. We'll have to check this against an agreement. The template has been this: a 6-month confidence-building period in which Iran essentially freezes its nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of some sanctions. During that 6-month period, the world powers say that they would then negotiate or start negotiating a more comprehensive deal with Iran. One of the problems with this approach has been this: Iran didn't just want to get an interim agreement. It wanted to see what a final deal, what a final comprehensive deal would look like. In other words, for the long term in the future, what kind of nuclear facilities, what kind of nuclear program would Iran be allowed to keep? It does not want to dismantle its nuclear program, as Israel has called for. And I think there will have been a lot of bartering about and a lot of negotiating about that in the last few days. Again, just to keep stressing, we've had these words from the French Foreign Minister, from the EU spokesman, very reliable, open now sources going on the record talking about this draft agreement, but because we haven't seen it, we're very, very clearly limited in our ability to comment on it knowledgeably.
Just finally, James, tell us what you think the reaction will be amongst the hardliners in Iran. We can imagine, but do you think Ayatollah Ali Khamenei can keep them happy, because he himself, the supreme leader, has said we want a deal?
Yes, and in September he said that he gave his negotiators heroic flexibility. It was a time for diplomacy, he said. I think the key thing for Iran has been this: the foreign minister in these negotiations has been supported by the president, Hassan Rouhani, and also directly by the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. So if a deal has been done, I think it already comes with the support of the supreme leader, which will in turn make it much easier to sell to hardliners in Tehran.